Q, The Winged Serpent, is a 1982 released monster B movie directed by Larry Cohen.
The cue of the title is Quetzalcoatl, a winged serpent from Aztec times, a god that they worshipped and made human sacrifices to. The film shows this serpent flying around above New York City, picking off people on the rooftops. And while this is happening, there's also strange murders being committed. Like there's a guy who's been flayed of all his skin. Investigating this crime is David Carradine and Richard Roundtree, who play a couple of New York cops. It appears to be some sort of ritual sacrifice. Then another plot thread you've got is with a sort of petty criminal by the name of Jimmy Quinn, who's played by Michael Moriarty, and he's sort of involved in a diamond heist that goes a bit wrong as he's trying to get away and hide from both the crooks that he was doing the job with and also the authorities. He finds himself at the top of the Chrysler building, I think because his lawyer has an office there. For some reason he decides to go up in the building rather than down, and stumbles across the nest of this winged beast. So it's all all a bit strange, but these sort of different threads come together as David Carradine, he goes to a museum and has a word with a sort of expert on Aztec culture, tells him about this winged serpent god that likes to snack on human prey and enjoys the odd human sacrifice in his honour. So it all sort of merges into one strange film that is sort of part monster B movie, part police procedural, and part crime flick.
Your pronunciation of the beast at the beginning there was spot on.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, well, because I was going to say, because there's a great scene. I think it's when they go to the museum and they're flicking through. It's just after that. He's been lent. David Carradine's character's been lent a couple of books to go look at, and he's sitting in his bedroom. That's all right, and he's flicking through one of these books. And as he goes through, it's got like sculptures of these gods and masks and Aztec ruins and temples and things like that. And there was one that caught my eye, and I looked at it, I was like, because it kind of went past quickly, and I was like, oh, what's that? I recognise that. What is that? And I was like, while I was watching the film, I was searching my brain for where I'd seen this thing from, and it'd been used on an album cover by the band Entombed, the Swedish death metal band. It was on their record. It's called 666, To Ride, Shoot Straight and Speak the Truth. And it was on the album cover of that.
There you go.
And it is too an Aztec god, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce. Anyway, that was a weird start to this video. Yes, it is an old film, this, isn't it? A lot of fun, though. So we actually covered a Larry Cohen film on this channel already. We covered God Told Me To quite a few months ago now. And I've seen most of his films, but I hadn't actually seen this one before. So I was quite glad to finally get to see it. And it's straight up Larry Cohen. It's a B movie, but it's kind of a B movie with depth. It's not just a trashy B movie. Well, it is just a trashy B movie horror film, but it's got these kind of, very kind of... There's a lot more going on in there. I mean, he's very satirical, his films. There's a lot of kind of social commentary all over them. I wouldn't say they're surreal. Maybe a bit of, I suppose absurdist, satire and the absurd are kind of similar things. I wouldn't say they're necessarily surreal, these films, but there is odd moments. There are odd cuts here and there. Yeah. And you don't know whether, it's obviously that's there for a reason, but sometimes it feels a bit kind of out of place and it jumps around quite a bit.
A lot of it sometimes feels like it possibly was a bit of guerrilla filmmaking, and there maybe shouldn't have been there. Got a very quick shot, but couldn't quite end it properly, so that's where the cut is. I don't know, it's probably not the case. That's what it feels like.
I did read, there's a really good book that I was going to mention. There's a book called, it's Larry Cohen, The Stuff of Gods and Monsters. Really big book, and there's lots of interesting, it's mainly interviews with Larry Cohen. And he does talk in there about how this one was kind of rushed, this film. So he'd been kicked off another film called I, the Jury before he started making this one. And literally days later, he was still in New York and he decided that he was going to make this film. And he literally went out and started shooting it there and then. Within days of being kicked off one film, he started production on this one. So I think, there is that kind of feeling of it being quite rushed. It's very similar to God Told Me To, I thought, in that it's got that realistic police documentary style feel to it. with shots of people running around outside in the streets.
There's handheld stuff, which for the time is quite rare.
Which also, you often see, if you see people in the background looking at the camera, when they've literally just gone out and shot what they need to shot as quickly as they can and got out of there. So yes, you're very much that kind of guerrilla film style. It's a monster movie, but then the central character is this weird, this kind of small petty crook who wants to be a jazz musician. And then finds that he can, kind of somehow exploits the system for his own gain.
Yeah, because he knows where this nest is and no one else does.
Exactly, yeah. So he's using that to make some money out of it. And it's something you don't tend to find in, it's Godzilla, it's King Kong, it's maybe Cloverfield, those kind of monster movies. But then you've got these weird kind of characters in there as well, which I think you do find a lot in Larry Cohen's work. I think he's very observant of people and lives and things like that, and he's able to put them into these essentially just trashy B-movie films that he makes.
I mean, I think a lot of it was shot on location in New York, which helps elevate its sort of B-movie status slightly. I mean, even at the start when we're up in the roof of the Chrysler Building, that is actually the top of the Chrysler Building. They shot there, and there's sort of the rickety ladder that leads right up to the top. That is actually how you get up there. And the crew had to lug all the gear up there and put all the wiring in for the lights and everything. And they weren't particularly pleased about it. Because, when I was watching it, I thought, that really does look like that is just New York outside. Yeah. It's not like some sort of blue screen stuff. That does look like that's actually outside the window. And that's because it was.
Yeah.
Apparently up there's not a lot of in the very top of the spire. There isn't really anything to stop you falling out. There's no railings or anything because no one really goes up there. I mean, obviously this is like nearly 40 years ago. I don't know if there's an observation deck there now. I'm not sure. Possibly, but certainly in those days there wasn't. It was just full of junk, left over from the building. When they put the building up, and also I guess to just store things up there. Filming in these actual places gives it that sort of adds to the realism, which helps when the actual monster maybe isn't the best.
I suppose it's like an homage to Ray Harryhausen and all those great, it's that kind of stop motion. So you got this kind of guerrilla type film making going on, and then you've got this kind of the police procedure feeling going on, and then these kind of kooky characters in there, and then on top of it you do have this monster that is stop motion. But looks great, in the scenes that it is. I mean, it's as the film moves along, you see a little bit of it at a time, and every time you see him, you see a bit more. And yes, it's obviously plasticine and or however they create these models, and then it's done at a stop frame. But it's great because if you love these kind of trashy B-movie horror films, then you're probably someone that grew up watching all the Ray Harryhausen movies, and you love those films too. So you just get a kick out of it for having this crazy monster in there. But unlike a lot of those films, well, some of them were quite gory. This one's quite gory as well, and there's some very funny, gory moments in there too, with some great lines. I will actually say, just on from what I said a moment ago, one thing that really stands out in this film for me is these wonderful shots of New York. These amazing aerial photography they got of New York. Yeah. He says in that book that's the first thing they shot. They literally went up in a helicopter and they shot all these scenes of New York. And not since the film West Side Story opens with a similar kind of, although that's more straight down, it kind of goes over the city of New York. This too, there's they're flying their helicopter in through around the skyscrapers, and of course you get to see the World Trade Center, which of course isn't there anymore, and it's some really great shots. I think I was reading that the guy, either the camera operator, had shot a lot of the stuff of New York for Superman around that time, a few years before as well. So it was the same. I think it was the same camera operator or the same helicopter pilot. I don't know, one of those two. I really loved the look of New York in that film. He really kind of captured the height and the scale and that the feel of being up where that monster is.
Even at the start, there's a great shot. There's a window washer outside, hanging outside of the Empire State Building. he was actually a real window washer.
Oh,
Which
really?
Is why he was actually there and wasn't, again, something that wasn't, green screen or blue screen or whatever. He was actually there because it was his job. He just gave him a few lines to do, and then he gets his head bitten off. So, but again, there's a great shot straight down, looking down, so you can see the street and everything behind him. And then there's another one where they're hanging the camera out another window, and they, so across to him. And yeah, like you say, loads of interesting shots of the city. A lot of films set in cities now, they just have the same old sort of scanning across the rooftops kind of shot, establishing shot. We're in the city now, here's an establishing shot of the city while we move to the next scene. But there's, the city was almost a character in the film.
Yeah, no, and then after that first scene, there's a great line when you see David Carradine and Richard Roundtree, who play the two police detectives in the film, and they're talking about kind of looking for this guy's head because they've got the body, but there's no head, and they're trying to work out why his head just came off, all the way up this side of this building. I think David Carradine, he just says maybe his head just came loose and fell off.
He's quite a strange character, isn't he? Because obviously, he goes to talk to the guy in the museum, but nothing. He's never really surprised by anything, is he? It's never, he's the first one to sort of believe that there is some sort of, winged serpent demon god flying around, and that it has been brought back by these ritual sacrifices. He connects the dots very early on, and it's like, yeah, this is what's happening.
But that's what's quite interesting about it, because there's at no point in there no one's really questioning this gigantic monster. Even when Quinn first finds it, he just randomly finds this thing, and then he seems to know exactly what's going on. No one really questions the bizarreness and the oddity of this gigantic monster flying around the rooftops of New York, eating people. It's quite interesting. I read an early review that suggested that the film is so over the top. He's almost like he just kept putting more and more crazy stuff in there, and just it kind of zips along at quite a quick pace, the film, because they just thought, if people start questioning this, I've just got to keep throwing them out more and more crazy curveballs, just to keep ramp up that madness, which I think works. I think Michael Moriarty's, and he's not an actor I knew, although he has worked with Larry Cohen after this. He went on to work with him quite a lot, but outside of that, I don't really know much about him. But he gives this incredible central performance, which is it's hard to describe. It's very kind of off the wall, and a bit kind of, he's a bit stumbles around, and he's a little bit childlike. He's a bit of a bumbling man-child a little bit. He's the driver for this job, but he's not very tough. He's not very manly. There is actually a line in there where he says about, he talks about that he shouldn't cry. He should be more of a man. I just thought his role was really interesting. And there's this great scene where he goes into a bar to see his girlfriend all the time. You don't know she's his girlfriend. And he basically says to the barman, I've come about the job of being a pianist. And that's kind of when you find out he wants to be this jazz pianist. And he sits down and he sings he does a scat song. It's just odd, and it's not the kind of thing you would think to have in a kind of movie like this.
No.
And I think that's what makes it quite interesting and intriguing, this movie.
His character is probably the most fleshed out, to be honest. We learn the most about him. Like you mentioned his girlfriend, who's played by Candy Clark. We find out a lot about their relationship. He's got alcohol problems. He's a little bit abusive towards her sometimes when he does have a drink. Yeah, we learn all sorts of stuff about him, but not really anybody else particularly. We see a little bit of David Carradine's home life, but nothing significant particularly. A little bit lopsided, perhaps, in favour of Michael Moriarty's character.
I really enjoyed it. It was quite trashy, but it worked in its favour. And I really liked the fact that the rest of the film felt kind of a bit that kind of realistic documentary feel, police procedure type stuff. But then you've got this trashy monster. It's genre mashing, really, isn't it? And I do love films that mix genres like that, especially if it's so kind of, black and white, so different. I really like that, and I think he does it really well in this one. And again, and God Told Me To as well. Although I think I preferred this one, actually.
This is strange, but I think God Told Me To is
that's really strange.
Stranger.
Yeah.
But no, they definitely have sort of visual similarities. This one I enjoy. This one's a bit more fun and sillier, shall we say.
And so you have it.
Yeah, I picked up the Shout Factory Blu-ray a little while ago. Got a commentary on it. That's, apart from trailers, that's the only extra, and that's just with Larry Cohen on his own. I mean, I listened to a little bit of it. Loads of interesting facts, just in the first few minutes. The picture's okay. It probably, it's not been restored, quite up to the standards of a lot of films these days, but it looks okay. There's a few scratches and marks and things on the picture, but it's not too bad. This is region free as well, which is unusual for Shout Factory. So if you are in the UK or anywhere in the world, you should be able to play it. I do love the poster. It's by a Peruvian artist called Boris Vallejo, and he does loads of sort of fantasy artwork. Lots of scantily clad ladies and muscle-bound men with big swords.
So that was Q, the Winged Serpent. And as always, if you enjoyed the video, let us know in the comments below.
Hit the subscribe button there, and don't forget to hit the bell for notifications. There's other videos to check out over here. Come and find us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, and join us next week for another video.